Good morning, it's Valerie Ling here. I happen to be a clinical psychologist. I also happen to be the director and founder of the Center for Effective Living. I also happen to be a human being living through some very interesting times at the moment. I've titled this live video For a Time Such as This. You will know, if you have followed me, my thoughts about the self-care movement. Recently, I've been talking about venting. I've been talking about how it really doesn't help us to go through a vent and self-care cycle. And you may have also heard me talk in the past that the self-care movement actually came from freedoms of rights and liberties and from the civil rights movement. And for a time such as this is probably an interesting title for my life, because for a time such as this, when we do see an outcry and an outpouring of emotion, but also of purpose, the self-care movement comes from this space. So here are my reflections at this point in time. The first reaction is it's so much easier to just shut it out and say it's really too hard and too much and too difficult. I admit I've had that reaction. I've already got so much going on in my world. Then I've got my family. Then I've got the people around me. I'm just dealing with COVID and the big purple bruise that the world has. I don't know if I have the capacity or the space to take in another round of distress. But this is the thing. For a time such as this, there is a time when we need to make the space. We need to do the hard work to reflect, because history will write what it remembers. And who remembers depends on who will stand up and say something and make it count. We can allow history to be written by the selective memories, or we can actually rewrite the history now. I want to tell you a story of, for me, Tiananmen Square, something that I have spoken about before, but I'm not sure if I've given you this further bit of the story. Tiananmen Square was my turning point as a teenager, when I realized the world was not as it was. Actually, if I really think about it, it probably sparked then a kind of a position of advocacy for some issues. The interesting thing is, several years later, as an adult, I was speaking to some university students who had come from China, and I mentioned Tiananmen Square, and they did not know what I was talking about. And as we engaged further, I realized that what they knew of history and what I knew of history was vastly different. As we sat around our dining table these last few days, my 16-year-old and my 14-year-old have been talking to us about Black Lives Matter. And my husband has been saying this is their Tiananmen Square. This is the moment where the world changes for them. And they see humanity for what it is, and they understand that it is not all that it is meant to be. Now, I could tell my children to block it out. I could tell them to cut down social media. There's some wisdom if it's causing them distress. But I can also be passing on a message that says it's too hard for us, the privileged lot of us, to engage with this matter. So do some self-care, kids. Turn away, disengage. I can't do that. I can't have kids who 5 years down, 10 years down the line look back on history and say, that's not really what happened. So self-care is for a time such as this. When we see, it's not, as I have understood, as I'm trying to grapple with it myself, it's not just implicit bias. It's not the kind of bias that comes because we have been conditioned to understand and we've been conditioned to see the world a particular way. It is systematic oppression. It is systematic bias. Look at the data, look at the literature, and where I'm at right now is I'm actually needing to relearn some Australian history. I kind of dropped history when I was in high school, which was a sad thing. We need to engage, and we need to make sure that we don't become a people of apathy and a people of bias and a people of, ignorance as well. I don't really know what that looks like. I just know that each one of us has been given a conscience, and each one of us has the capacity to expand our resources, to expand our reflection time, to be generous and to give it to others, to make space to engage with things that may be difficult, because we can't allow these voices to die down. So, for a time such as this is the true origins, perhaps, if I dare say, of self-care. It is to preserve a voice. It is to preserve a space that says this matters. This requires our attention. This requires our engagement in whatever form that is. Whether it's to be able to tolerate some self-evaluation and reflection on our part as to how little we know and how much we perpetuate this bias. Whether it's practically being able to engage in ways that promote this message, whether it's in ways that actually creates the environment to put this top of mind at this moment and ask ourselves, how can we be a part of a change that is needed and necessary and systemic? Those are my thoughts this morning.